Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 4 of my Southwest Saguaro series, and in this video we're going to add the foreground vegetation and highlight the saguaros. If you're following along with traditional materials such as acrylics, check out part 1 for a list of all the brushes and the canvas and the paint that I use. The app that we're going to be using is ArtRage 5 for Windows, and we're going to go ahead and start adding some of the brush to the foreground here. And in ArtRage 5 they've added some new splatter brushes, and so I've picked some of these to use for the brush that's going to be at the foot of the cactuses. And you can use sort of a sage green color, and for those that are using acrylic paint, take your hooker's green and add some dioxazine purple and a little bit of white, and you'll kind of get a sort of a grayish green. And you can add more green to make it look darker, and you can add more white if you want it to get sort of a more sage green color here. And so I'm just kind of adding in this underground brush here in sort of a zigzag shape. We want to leave little pockets of the ground showing through because it adds interest to your painting, and it shows the dirt that's on this little hill that all the saguaros are sitting on. And add a little bit of purple to the bottom of these clumps of the bushes here. That gives your shadows, and it settles the clumps down and makes them look like they're not floating. So you want to go ahead and do that, and you can use dioxazine purple if you're following along with your acrylics. And here I'm just kind of finding another splatter brush that I like, and I'm going to use it to sort of highlight the brush that's on this little hill. And so I'm using a sort of a yellow ochre color, and just go ahead and sort of shape the clumps of your bushes. Just make them look like it's kind of like there's greasewoods out there, and there's several different kinds, but greasewood is a predominant vegetation out in the desert sort of. And then you can kind of darken the bushes a little bit along the edge of your picture there, and that'll just kind of help make your picture stand out, and it adds depth there. And then I wanted to kind of add a little bit more darker green to the yellow patches in the middle ground. I just thought that it was a little bit too much yellow in the middle ground, and it was sort of distracting the viewer's eye. So I just went ahead and took a little bit of the same green mixture, yellow ochre with hooker's green mixed together for those working with acrylic, and just added it in the middle ground. And you can do this, if you're working traditionally too. Just go back and add a little bit of paint and smudge it in with your finger or a paper towel. And it works better, of course, or it's not better, but it's easier if you have layers digitally. You can kind of go back and just go back behind the foreground cactuses there, but you have to make sure that you put them on a separate layer. And so it's a little bit easier, but it's not that hard if you're following along traditionally. Just, don't get the paint on your cactus, and just kind of spread it around right next to it, and just keep working it in with your paintbrush or smudging it in with your finger, and it's not really that big of a deal. And so I'm just kind of working at that, still adding different shades of green. You don't have to keep the green the same color. In fact, keep it different, because greens can get monotonous. So you want to add maybe more yellow to the middle ground greens and more purple to the foreground here. And so I'm kind of adding a little bit darker along the edges of this little hill to separate it from the middle ground here. And you can go ahead and just throw purple into your mixture if you're working with acrylics or even oils. And just kind of go back and add in the zigzag shapes again and let pockets of the ground show up next to the bushes. And I'm just kind of trying to highlight the ground a little bit, just add a little bit more of the dirt back in, just to kind of show that it's got pockets of dirt amongst the bushes here. And then just smudge it in a little bit. It doesn't have to be big detail. We just kind of want some indications of dirt and rocks there. And then we want to go ahead and choose I use the thin draft pen to do in some twiggy bushes, and use a light color like a real light orange or light yellow. And if you're following along with your acrylics, you'll take your long script brush and some really thin paint, and probably cadmium orange with a whole bunch of white gesso, and just mix a really thin mixture. Add a lot of water to it and roll your brush in that mixture until you get a tip that's really sharp on your paintbrush. And then you can go ahead and make these twiggy bushes. And you can also take your burnt umber and add a bunch of darker ones too, just to add more interest there, because there'll be, of course, dark branches and light branches. And these are just dead grease woods, and there are different kinds of vegetation there that grows out in the desert. I don't know all the names of everything, but I just call them bushes and twiggy bushes. But anyway, here I'm working on the saguaros a little bit, and I'm making them a little bit more filled in, because in ArtRage 5, when you use the pencil, it kind of leaves gaps, because the feature that it has is that it's using the paper grain, which I like that. I mean, that's exactly what I want. But for this, I just want to fill in a little bit more on the saguaros here, make them a little bit more opaque. And I'm also using a highlight color here, and kind of a light yellow or a light green color. If you're going to be following along traditionally with your acrylics, probably phthalo yellow green with yellow ochre mixed together, and throw in a bunch of white acrylic gesso. And just use that for your highlight. And we want the light to come from the right side. And so just go ahead and highlight the right side of your saguaros here, and keep these lines rough. Don't make them solid. Make them sort of broken and jagged, because we want to show the stickers and the rows that grow in rows on the saguaros there. And you can add a little bit more of purple back to give the shadow color on the left side. And just keep doing that for each one, and you can vary the colors of the yellow and the greens, and you can throw in a little bit of burnt sienna if you're following along traditionally with your acrylic, and just kind of give them varied colors. We don't want the highlights to be all the same, because this just gives more interest to your painting to kind of add the different colors. And if you look at your photo references, you can tell that there are different colors on the saguaros. They're not just a solid green or a solid dark purple look, but they actually have different colors. And here I'm just sort of darkening the shadows a little bit, and giving the rough look to the saguaros in the back, even though you don't see big details on those because they're farther away from the viewer's eye. You still want to kind of give them a rough look there for the highlights and the shadows. And so I'm doing that, adding a light green color for some of these in the back here. And just take your hooker's green and throw in white if you're following along with your acrylic painting or even oil painting. This will work with oil painting too. And so then I'm just kind of adding a little bit of shadow to one of the bigger saguaros that's closer to the viewer's eye, and that gives a little bit of an indication of detail. Although it's not real big detail, it's giving sort of an indication, and that's all that you really need here. And then I threw in a little bit of yellow ochre here to give more color to this saguaro on this side. And then you just kind of want to work a little bit on the shadows, and to add a little bit of shadows behind the saguaros, I'm adding a purple color and making them kind of rough, but like it's a real long shadow, like the sun is hitting them from the right side and it's making the shadow on the left side. And if you're following along traditionally, just use dioxazine purple. Just smudge it on there. You can smudge it with your finger and a paper towel. Also in the middle ground, give those just a little bit of some shadows. You don't need to make it real noticeable, but just a little bit of some shadows to those saguaros too, because you'll be able to see the shadows also on those, even though they're farther away. And so we're about ready to do the trick that Bob Ross does, but we'll be doing that in the next video. And so this is what it looks like right now with the stencil on and everything. This is what it's about ready to go ahead and add the little fancy trick that Bob Ross adds. But we're going to do that in part 5. So this is the end of part 4 of my Southwest Saguaro series. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.